to create some more content for you. He's talking about some directors he knows. These are the Teenage Film Snob hiatus shows.
Welcome to Ours, a Teenage Film Snob. I'm James Chalmers, your friendly neighborhood film snob, and it's another solo show. I'm still on hiatus, still recording all these episodes months in advance to make sure you have some lovely content while I'm taking a bit of a break. And we are continuing the director series. I will break it up and not do just horror directors, but it is another horror episode today. Previously, if these drop in the order I recorded them, we have focused on Robert Eggers, we have talked about Rob Zombie, and now we're talking about a director that I've been a fan of for a long, long time, going on 20 years. Probably the first horror director I really got fascinated by when I saw his debut film, Cabin Fever. I am, of course, talking about Eli Roth. Eli Roth is a wonderful American director, New York Film School grad, has had an ongoing relationship with Quentin Tarantino, to the point where he was cast in Inglourious Bastards. He was a short filmmaker at first, and his college shorts are available on some of his Blu-rays. He is mostly stuck to the horror genre. There are a couple of flicks outside of the genre, but has mostly been focusing on horror. He's also an unofficial member of the Splat Pack. That is a series of directors who, in the mid to late 2000s, created these ultra-violent, bloody, gory horror films. It also includes the likes of Neil Marshall, who did The Descent, and Alexandra Aja, who did Piranha and Hills Have Eyes, the remake, and a few other things, high tension stuff like that as well. So Eli Roth's a really fascinating guy, made some really interesting horror movies, some very, very violent and envelope-pushing horror movies as well. I wouldn't go so far as to say he's a director of extreme cinema, but a couple of his flicks definitely do get close. He's also a fan of extreme horror, as seen in movies like Hostel and The Green Inferno, which was his love letter to the Cannibal Holocaust. If you've never seen Cannibal Holocaust, I don't recommend it. If you're into extreme horror, go for it, but if you're not, you can skip that one. I'm actually meant to be sitting down with a fan of extreme horror tonight as I'm recording this, so it's quite possible we'll talk about Cannibal Holocaust in a bit more detail, and then you'll understand why most people don't need to watch that movie. Eli Roth has directed 9 feature films in his career, and I like most of them. There are a couple I like a little bit less. There are a handful I've only seen once, so as with my previous episodes, the ones I've only seen once will be a little bit lower on the ranking, simply because it seems unfair to rank them a little bit higher if I haven't seen them as many times. I haven't unpacked them as much. I am only counting features, as always. I am not including films he produced, so Hostel 3 will not make an appearance on this list. He didn't direct Hostel 3. He only served as a producer capacity, and I think was even only executive producer. I don't think he was on set at any time during Hostel 3. I won't be talking about any of the TV series he's involved with, and I won't be talking about any of the TV specials either. I know he had a lot to do with Shark Week, and he's done some stuff there. I'm focusing solely on his theatrical releases. So we're going to have some fun. And Eli Roth makes nasty horror films. Very violent, very gory, often quite mean-spirited, but not without a wry sense of humour. If you look at every single one of his flicks, there is a sense of humour to them. There's some jokes in there. There's a little bit more oddball stuff. Cabin Fever really set the tone for his career. And then Hostel really had doubled down on what he was going to do with his work. So I'm a big fan. His films are not going to be for everyone. And that's totally fine. But if you've never seen an Eli Roth film, I will make some recommendations at the end as well. And hopefully you can taste some of his work. But yeah, we're going to rank them in reverse order, as always, countdown from 9 to 1. So I'm going to start off with a movie that I was really, really looking forward to. I haven't rewatched it. I definitely do need to rewatch it. But at the time, it just didn't do much for me. It's not a bad film by any stretch of the imagination. I just felt for an Eli Roth film, it was a little bit too restrained. And that's why I haven't gone back to it yet. But I will watch it again at some point. And it's the remake of Death Wish starring Bruce Willis. I remember very little about this film. I've seen the original Death Wish, of course, from the 70s, I want to say it was. And that's quite a fascinating flick. This one here, I was really on board. Bruce Willis, I've loved forever. I think the first Bruce Willis film I ever saw was The Kid. And then, of course, as I got older, I went and saw Die Hard and all the more adult ones. I'm a big fan of Bruce Willis. I've always enjoyed his performances. So I was excited to see him play a character motivated by revenge, because that's what Death Wish is. For those who are unfamiliar, Death Wish is a revenge film. In the original one, where Charles Bronson played the lead role, his wife and daughter were attacked, abused, and murdered. At least his wife was murdered. I think his daughter actually survived. And then he went around town trying to hunt down the people who harmed his family and take revenge. Death Wish, the remake, starring Bruce Willis, to the best of my knowledge, doesn't have any of the abuse stuff, if I remember correctly. It's a little bit more... it's a little bit safer, which I'm okay with, by the way. That's not the critique I have of this film. I was happy not to have that in there. But I believe his wife is murdered, and then he hunts down all the people and takes revenge. The only scene I remember from this, and that's why it's on at number 9, is because I just don't remember it very well, is when he drops a car on someone and their brain falls out of their head, which, to be fair, was pretty impactful and pretty cool at the time. But I just don't remember too much of it. And that's why it's getting ranked low. It's not that it's a poor film. Again, I wouldn't rank the films of directors I didn't like. I wouldn't rank films I didn't like. So I did enjoy it for what it was. I just have very little memory of it. But because it made the least impact out of all of the Eli Roth films, it's getting the 9th place. But it's not to say it's a bad film. Moving into 8th place is a film that I would say I remember as equally as Death Wish, so you could kind of put them at equal pacing. It's the only Eli Roth film that I would say is made for families. It's a kids' film. It's a kids' horror film starring Jack Black, and it's called The House with a Clock in Its Walls. And I just don't remember this flick at all. I don't remember it, and that's why I'm not giving it a high ranking. These first two films are almost kind of non-ranked. I just want to talk about them and mention them. I remember enjoying it. I remember enjoying Jack Black playing this kind of weird, creepy uncle role where he's like moving around this haunted house. I liked that Eli Roth wanted to take his brand of horror and funnel it in a way that was accessible for families. I liked that because you don't get a lot of kids' horror films anymore. So I enjoyed all of that. I just don't remember anything else. I don't remember the plot. I don't remember much of anything. So I can't rank it, So just like Death Wish, it's a little bit lower. And that's all I got on those first two. Now we're going to dive into some films that I've seen a few times. There's only one film on this list further that I've only seen once. The rest I've seen multiple times. And I will say, like, from 5 onwards, the ranking is pretty interchangeable. I really like Eli Roth as a director. I like his brand of horror. From 5th place onwards, on any given day, the films could move around. But before we get to 5, before we get too premature, we're going to talk about movie number 7. This is a film I was really excited to see. I didn't know much about it. I knew it was a remake of a film called Game of Death from either the 70s or 80s, which was a very little-known film. But when I read about it and the kind of film it was, I was excited because not only was Eli Roth working with Keanu Reeves, which was very exciting, but he was also working in a genre that was so different from what he'd done before. His first 4 or 5 films are all violent horror films. Cabin Fever, Hostel, Hostel 2, Green Inferno, all super violent, gory films. This was more of a thriller, and I believe in the lead up to the release, or during the making of it, he was referring to it as a psychosexual thriller, and I was like, I don't know what that means, but that sounds kind of cool. And the result was a movie called Knock Knock. Now, Knock Knock features Keanu Reeves in the lead role. He is a husband and a father. He's got a couple of young children, and he's got to stay back and work while his family goes on a trip to their grandparents or whatever the case may be. The inciting incident isn't really all that important. And then late on the very first night, he gets a knock at the door, and there are 2 young women who talk about how their car's broken down, they're stranded, they're wearing very little clothing, they're soaked in the rain, and they want to know if they can come in and use his phone. Interestingly, it's very similar to the first act of Human Centipede. Same sort of thing happens. From there, they try to seduce him, and successfully. Spoiler alert, they successfully seduce him. in some very graphic scenes, which I wasn't expecting, because that's never really been Eli Roth's style. I think in the first Hostel, there was a little bit of sexuality, if I remember correctly, but mostly his films are actually pretty devoid of sex. But this was a whole nother level. It's one of the very first English films for Ana de Armas, who is great in the film. And that's the thing. The film is very hard to watch. And it's not because it's a poorly made film. The characters are so unlikable. The performances are very intentionally cringeworthy. You're meant to be watching on and feel gross about it. You're meant to not like anyone in the film. Even Keanu Reeves, at certain points, you can't like his character because he just makes every bad decision possible. It also features Lorenza Izzo, I think that's her name. If I've got it wrong, I do apologize, who was, I believe, Eli Roth's wife at the time. They've since divorced. And again, like, really wonderful performances, really funny, but not in a laugh out loud, ha-ha kind of way. Just, it's a very different style of humor. But once you get to the first night that they're there, like, it's very funny. Like, you kind of buy into it. The second day, once they reveal their true intentions, which is just to mess up this guy's life, and they're destroying his house and all sorts of stuff, it's very hard to watch. It's not pleasant. And again, there's nothing objectionable. It's just they're so childish and infantile and bratty. And it's just really, really hard to watch. But that's the point. So Knock Knock's a really interesting one. I remember when it got announced, I said to my wife, I'm like, oh man, Eli Roth's got a film with Keanu Reeves. You love Keanu Reeves. We'll have to watch this one. And she was like, yeah, I'll check it out. After I watched it, I was like, you don't want to watch this. You don't want to watch this. It's too gross. There's too much ick in it. It's a flick I've seen a handful of times, probably 3 or 4 times. And every time I watch it, I feel dirty after watching it. Which again, I think is the intention. I think of all of Eli Roth's films, it's the one that's affected me in the most profound way. It's left me feeling the most unclean, the most upset, which is the mark of a good horror filmmaker. And I think it's a really effective film, but I think a lot of people either didn't get it or they just didn't like the way they felt after it, and so it has a very low rating online. But it is a really well-made film, and it does exactly what it sets out to do, and I think some people didn't like that it was as effective as it was. So Knock Knock is in 7th place. Listen to the way I'm talking about this flick. I'm like, this is a masterpiece. Why is it number 7? It's because I don't enjoy it as much as the other ones. Coming in at number 6, I think is probably going to be the most divisive ranking on my entire list. I think so far people would agree that all of those films belong on the lower end of the list. Number 6 is going to be the one that I think subverts expectation. I think people are going to be a little bit frustrated by it. I'm putting in Borderlands. Borderlands was Eli Roth's adaptation of the famous video game series. I've never played the video games, so I didn't have an emotional investment in this flick. I was not worried about them ruining the game. I wasn't worried about them getting things wrong. I was just going in as a new viewer. And apparently it was like the lowest rated film of the year in 2024, and people hated it and all this sort of stuff. It's the only film above 8 that I've only seen once, but I enjoyed Borderlands for what it was. You know, I wasn't going in taking it too seriously. I liked the cast. I liked Jack Black. I liked the visual style. And I remember when I reviewed it, and this is a comment that I know a lot of people are going to hate, but when I reviewed it, I was like, if it wasn't attached to Borderlands, if no one knew what Borderlands was, and it was released in 2014, this is just another version of Guardians of the Galaxy. And I know that's going to hurt people, and they're not going to like that, and they're going to come after me. But you've got a crazy bunch of misfits, you've got a robot, you've got a pop music soundtrack, it's very colourful. I'm not saying it's as good as Guardians of the Galaxy, I'm just saying the recipe is very, very similar. But I enjoyed it. You know, I had fun with it. I liked the world building, I liked the design. Apparently Eli Roth wasn't as involved in this one. There was a lot of second unit directing going on because he had to go and work on other projects as well. But for what it is, I think Borderlands is kind of fun. I know I'm apparently an audience of one there. But I would say if you haven't seen it, just go with an open mind. It is kind of fun, you know? Like, it's not, you know, it's not a perfect film. It's not going to win any awards. But since when has film been all about awards? It's meant to be about enjoying yourself. And I had a lot of fun with it. And it was also nice, and I think the reason why I rank it a little bit higher is I've lived with Eli Roth films for over 20 years now, and this is the first time he's really gone in a mainstream direction. Even House with a Clock in Its Walls, whilst more mainstream and more, family friendly, not exactly, Disney Pixar stuff. It's still, kind of dark and different and not for everyone. This one was definitely designed with the general audience in mind, and I thought he did a pretty good job. I'd like to see him take another swing at something else in the same kind of area. But yeah, I like Borderlands. All right. Those are my lowest ranked Eli Roth films. I like them all in different ways, but those are the ones I've seen the least, the ones I don't need to watch as much, the ones I'm not thinking about regularly. From here on in, these are the creme de la creme for me. These are all wonderful films, really well made, really well executed, total Eli Roth brand and flavor, exactly what you should expect from an Eli Roth film are all of these films. So in fifth place, and remember, as I've said, these could be interchangeable. I could change the ranking of these next 5 films any day of the week and be happy with their placement. But in number 5, I'm coming in with 2007's Hostel. This was his sophomore effort. It was his follow-up to Cabin Fever. Eli Roth made Cabin Fever. The funding of that film was very largely responsible thanks to IMDb, because back when IMDb first started, it was more of a news rag, and investors saw like all these kind of shots and clips from behind the scenes. They wanted to get involved and help fund it. And through Cabin Fever, Eli Roth gained notoriety within the film community. Peter Jackson saw the film and touted it. Peter Jackson was coming off Lord of the Rings Return of the King at this stage. And he also has a horror origins of his career. All of his early stuff is gore and splatter. So he kind of touted it. Quentin Tarantino saw it and then worked with Eli Roth quite a bit. And Quentin Tarantino ended up producing Hostel. And Hostel, the first film, its one sheet, its main poster, is still one of the creepiest images you'll see on any poster. It was just a man's head thrust backwards with an open mouth and a drill going inside. Terrifying. I remember talking to a friend at school at the time. I was in my final year of high school in 2006, and he said, I don't need to see that flick. I like horror films. I like Cabin Fever, but that trailer is too unsettling for me. I'm not going to watch it. Which is fair enough, I suppose. I've also said that Hostel was 2007, but now I think actually it might have been 2005. I think Hostel 2 is 2007. Don't worry about that. The dates are irrelevant for this discussion. All you need to know is his second film. Hostel follows 3 backpackers, 2 Americans and an Icelandic man named Oli, who they met on their backpacking adventure, and they're working through Europe, and they wind up in Amsterdam, and their whole journey is kind of centered around meeting women, blowing off steam, getting drunk, exploring culture that isn't American. And it starts off very funny. These 3 guys are very likable, even though they make some questionable decisions. I am willing to admit they're dudes who have just finished high school or they're on a college break. They're not the smartest guys in the world. They're portrayed in the way Americans were viewed at the time in the 2000s. This is a George Bush era film, and a lot of films portrayed Americans as kind of oafish and dumb and sticking their nose in business that they shouldn't. That was very popular in Hollywood at the time, and Eli Roth definitely utilized that. But they're very sweet at heart. Like, they're just going on a bit of an adventure. And then they end up taking a detour and ending up in Slovakia, which Eli Roth has gone on record as saying is one of his favorite places to shoot. It's very inexpensive, and you have so much culture. You don't need to do set design because everywhere around Slovakia and most of Europe, there's just centuries of culture. So he used that, and that gothic kind of architecture really adds to the creepiness. So they end up in Slovakia. They go to this hotel, and it's interesting. Like, this is a pre-John Wick film, but the hotel they stay at and the whole hunting organization is very similar in a lot of ways to the Continental and the way that's all done in the John Wick universe. So there is some parallel there. And then add into the fact that Keanu Reeves was in Knock Knock, there's a lot of overlap, which is kind of cool. It also just made me realize how much I want a Continental versus hunting group movie. Eli Roth and everyone involved in John Wick, get on it, please. I'd like that very much. So they arrive at this hotel, they go out, they meet these cute Slovakian girls, and they end up hooking up in some very graphic scenes. As I said, like, this is the only other film, I think, where Eli Roth truly explores sexuality and kind of gets a little bit exploitative with it, in the interest of the film. Like, that is what I mean there. And then they lose Oli one night at an event. He goes missing. They get a text from him saying that he's okay, but he's gone back to Iceland. And then it's revealed that Oli has been murdered. He's been decapitated, and it's just in this kind of rusty, dank room filled with blood and kind of old fire hoses washing all the gore away, and a guy in like an iron mask. And the imagery is so striking. I remember the first time I watched Hostel, like, the outfits that these guys wear when they torture these people are so cool and medieval and terrifying and just so well done. The film then kind of follows the two guys, and they continue their adventures, and then I can't remember the characters' names or the actors, but the blonde guy ends up disappearing next. And in his torture sequence, there are a couple of really wonderful cinematic moments that don't get talked about enough. The first is when he throws up with the ball gag in his mouth. And I know what you're thinking, how is that cinematic and wonderful? It's just something you haven't seen before. And I remember watching the behind-the-scenes footage and how they planned it, and like how meticulous the preparation was to, kind of get that end result. There was also a scene where one of the torturers, because the hunting group are basically rich, wealthy people from all around the world who have experienced every luxury in life. The only thing they haven't done or experienced is taking the life of another human. So they sign up to this hunting club. They can bid on tourists who will then be abducted, and then they can torture them and kill them and all this sort of stuff. It's a really, obviously, very dark film. So the blonde guy is sitting there, and his torturer ends up putting a drill bit into his leg, and I remember that was insane. Like, nowadays, in the era of Saw and Terrify and all that sort of stuff, we've seen all sorts of horrible things, but at the time it was so simple yet effective and just gross. And then the final bit in this sequence, which I think is one of the best things that's ever been put on film. Honestly, like, I talk about the shot of the bride and Oren Ishii in the House of Blue Leaves, in that final fight in Kill Bill Volume 1, is one of the best sequences of all time. I would add this as to one of the best sequences of all time. The torturer bends down and has a pair of pliers or like iron scissors and holds them to the blonde guy's Achilles heel. And as he closes, the screen wipes across to a girl painting her toenails pink. And it's just the perfect cut, and it does everything it needs to do, and it's really upsetting and obviously plays on your imagination and gets quite violent and gross. I won't break down the rest of the film, because if you haven't seen Hostel, it's definitely worth seeing. But I will say it's very violent and upsetting. There's a lot of more body mutilation. There's some burning. There's some removal of certain organs. It gets pretty full on pretty quickly. But a really well-made horror film, a really great villain. The organization, the hunting group, the elite hunting group, I think is a fantastic villain. And just, I think, really played on the idea of the fear of unknown, the fear of travel, the fear. It's a film about xenophobia is ultimately what it is, and that's what Eli Roth has said as well. The fear of the unknown, the fear of other cultures and not being able to speak the language and just assuming the worst. And in a post-9/11 world, this was quite a profound film. So Hostel, I think, is fantastic. Let's dive into number 4. Number 4 for me is Eli Roth's debut film, Cabin Fever. I think Cabin Fever is wonderful. It's a really well-made flick. It kind of took the Evil Dead blueprint and kind of reimagined it using the world of flesh-eating bacteria as opposed to ghosts and zombies and possession and stuff like that. The story follows 5, I guess they're youths. They all look like they're about 40, but they're not. They're definitely not. You got Ryder Strong, who had been in a bunch of like soap operas. Serena Vincent, who you may remember from Not Another Teen Movie. She's the European exchange student. And a couple others whose names escape me right now. But Cabin Fever is fantastic. These 5 friends, well, I say they're friends. They're pretty mean to each other. It's a pretty mean-spirited film. It's very obnoxious in a way. And these five friends go out to a cabin. The opening scene of the film, we see there's like a dead animal in the river, and what we don't know is that animal was infected with a flesh-eating virus, and it's infecting all the water in the local area. So these five friends, they head up to this cabin, they drink the water, and over the period of the film start to experience this flesh-eating bacteria kind of killing them from the inside out. It's very violent, it's very gory, but it's laced with humor. It's so funny in certain scenes. There's a great sequence where Eli Roth makes a cameo. He plays a weed dealer who's just roaming through the forest with his dog, Dr. Mumbo, and he tells the story of an insane person who went around killing people in a bowling alley and stuff like that. It's really wonderful. It really is. It's not going to be for, again, Eli Roth, not going to be for everyone, but this flick let you know everything you need to know about Eli Roth as a filmmaker from day one. It's just this wonderful blend of humor and horror and gore. And again, it doesn't hold back. It just does everything it needs to do. And it's so weird. The humor is weird. The sheriff or like the police deputy who ends up partying with the kids and stuff like that, he's a really weird character. And like most of Eli Roth's early work, it has a bad ending. And when I say bad, I mean the film it ends poorly. It's not a happy ending, which is quite interesting. They would go on to make a bunch more cabin fever films. There are 4 in total. We've got Cabin Fever 2, Spring Fever, which was directed by Ty West, although he has since denounced that film, saying he didn't make it. I quite like Cabin Fever 2. I think it's really underrated. Cabin Fever Patient Zero, which is the 3rd one, is maybe one of the grossest films of all time. I remember feeling physically ill watching it because the gore is so intense. And I've got a pretty strong stomach when it comes to gore, but that was pretty full on. And then the remake, which is basically shot for shot of the original. I think it's really underrated. People don't like it because they didn't really bring much new to it. But they did take out all the jokes, which makes it a very different film. So I do like the remake, but 2003's Cabin Fever, 2002's, is just an incredible feat for me. I think it's really wonderfully made. I think it's a really enjoyable film, despite being really gross and unpleasant. And it's a trip to watch. It's a good, like, Halloween drinking film. If you like to party and watch movies with your friends, like with a couple of beers and stuff like that, Cabin Fever is definitely for that, because it's a trip for sure. Coming in at number 3, I would say was arguably, in the history of Eli Roth films, my most anticipated Eli Roth film. When they announced this, I was so excited because it was going away from the world of torture porn, even though I don't really believe in torture porn. I don't think that's really what it is. There's a lot more to the films than just torture for torture's sake. But it was the first time we'd gone in a different direction, at least for a little while. And it's 2013's Green Inferno. I remember when it was announced, it was meant to play at Monster Fest here in Australia. Monster Fest is an annual horror festival. Every year, around September, October, they bring in a bunch of horror films. And its Australian debut was meant to be at Monster Fest. I'd bought my ticket. I was all excited to go and see it. And then at the very last minute, they pulled it. There were some issues with the ratings and it didn't get approved for screening in Australia. And they're like, we can show you Zombievers instead. And so I cancelled my ticket. I did end up seeing Zombievers years later and I did really enjoy it. But Green Inferno, I was just so eager to check this out. I knew how much Eli Roth liked cannibal films. I knew how much he liked Cannibal Holocaust. So I was really excited to see what he did with it. And it doesn't disappoint. The Green Inferno, first of all, visually is stunning. The use of color in this movie is incredible. The makeup effects are fantastic. All the tribes people in this film are people who actually live in tribes in the jungle. They weren't actors. And there's a story, I don't know how much truth there is to it, but apparently Eli Roth showed the people in the tribe the original Cannibal Holocaust and they had a great time with it. Make of that what you will. we have got Lorenza Izzo returning. She was also in Knock Knock. This film was shot before Knock Knock, but due to the ratings issues, they end up being released around the same time. And basically the plot of this story is a group of young activists go into the Amazon rainforest to protest the cutting down of trees. People are, logging the rainforest, they're destroying the rainforest. They want to stop that. They want to speak out. They want to protest it. So they chain themselves to these trees to stop from happening. They're successful in their mission, and then on the flight out, there's an issue with their plane. It crashes in the Amazon, and they're abducted and chained up by this tribe, who then proceed to slowly go and kill and eat all of them. And it's pretty full on. Like, one guy, you literally watch them carve this guy up and serve him on a barbecue. And again, that's that Eli Roth weird sense of humor. Like, it's grotesque and it's horrifying, but it's also a little bit funny, even though it probably shouldn't be. The only problem I have with this flick is that there's a scene where someone gets attacked by bullet ants or something, and the ants are all CGI, and that seemed a little bit unnecessary given how obvious it is CGI. Like, you can kind of see the way they're moving. It's definitely a computer. I understand why. You don't want to throw someone in with real ants, and I guess it's kind of tough to do with makeup effects and props and stuff like that. That's the only kind of objection I have to the entire film, but it's such a small moment. It's not like I don't like the film. It's ranked relatively high in the list. I'm putting it number 3. Yeah, it's definitely not for the squeamish. It's definitely one of his more brutal films. I wouldn't put it as violent as either of the Hostel films he directed, but I would say it's probably more violent than Cabin Fever. But Green Inferno is a really interesting flick. It's really well done. A lot of fun. And none of that animal violence. I feel like it's Cannibal Holocaust for the modern audience without the really unpleasant stuff, with that all taken out. So, brutal in as much as, yes, people are murdered and eaten and abducted, but also none of the sexual stuff, which is quite unpleasant. None of the animal killings, which is also very unpleasant. Which makes for a more enjoyable film. So Green Inferno, really underrated. People don't talk about it much, but definitely well worth your time. I really enjoy the Green Inferno. Coming in at number 2 is one of Eli Roth's most recent films. I was also very eager for this one. Just in general, I'm always eager for Eli Roth. I think, he made such an impact on me at such an early age that whenever an Eli Roth film is announced, my ears perk up. I'm always interested. But I was particularly excited about this one because he finally, after over 10 years, made the feature version of a fake trailer he made for a film called Grindhouse. Now, if you're familiar with the work of Quentin Tarantino at all, if you're familiar with the work of Robert Rodriguez at all, you may remember in 2007, the two directors came together and instead of making one movie each, they made this double feature inspired by the exploitation films of the 70s and 80s, inspired by the experience of going to the Grindhouse cinemas on 42nd Street. And basically what it was, they filmed a double feature. So Quentin Tarantino's film was Death Proof, which remains, I think, his most underrated film of his entire filmography. And Robert Rodriguez directed Planet Terror, which I actually think is one of his best films. And they put them together back to back with the intention of, people going and seeing this double feature, experiencing what it was like to go and see two kind of nasty films in a double feature scenario. And they asked some of their friends to film trailers. Edgar Wright directed Don't, which is a really fun trailer. Rob Zombie directed Werewolf Women of the SS. And Eli Roth directed my favorite trailer of the three, Thanksgiving, which was basically a holiday slasher set around Thanksgiving, because Eli Roth at the time said, there's plenty of Christmas horror films, of course, there's plenty of Halloween films, we've got 4th of July horror films, but the one holiday that's not really observed in the horror genre is Thanksgiving, so let's fix that. And the idea was that it was a guy dressed up like a pilgrim, decapitating people, roasting them like turkeys and all that sort of stuff. In 2023, I want to say it was, 2023, we got Thanksgiving. It took 15 years, but we got Thanksgiving. And to me, it remains not only one of Eli Roth's best films, it's one of his most fun, and I think of all of his movies in the horror genre, it's his most accessible. I think anyone who's interested in horror can watch Thanksgiving and for the most part have a pretty enjoyable time. There is one sequence in a roasting oven, which will definitely make the less experienced horror fans squeamish. But all in all, I think it's a really effective horror film. Again, it's got that Eli Roth sense of humor. It's quite funny at times. The whole set design and look and feel of the film is perfect. Patrick Dempsey is incredible. He's so good in this film. I've never watched much of Patrick Dempsey's work. I obviously know him as McDreamy in Grey's Anatomy. I remember those trailers, from 20 years ago now. But I'd never seen him in much. Certainly hadn't seen him really do too much horror. Except, of course, Scream 3. And in this, he's just wonderful. The entire young cast is really good. I enjoyed all of them. There's some really great misdirects. It's just a really fun horror film. It's a slasher film we've needed. I talked about it in a podcast recently. I was just on the Lights Camera Rant show last night, actually, at the time of this recording. And I was talking about how we don't really have any modern horror villains. Art the Clown is kind of the only guy. But I'd forgotten about the Pilgrim from Thanksgiving. They are making a second one. I don't know how far into production they are. But I would be cool if this went the route of Freddy and Jason, where the creator makes a few and then it kind of gets sequelized into oblivion. It feels like the kind of movie that has the potential for those legs and can afford to get silly. Thanksgiving in Space is totally an option with this franchise. I really like it. It's got some very surprising kills, especially in the Parade Massacre. There's an instance with a boat that I was not expecting, and that messed me up for a couple of minutes in the film. It's great. It's really, really good. It's a fantastic, straightforward horror slasher with a little bit of a mystery, and definitely satisfied my thirst for a film like that. We hadn't had anything like that in a while. Even Terrifier is far more extreme than Thanksgiving, so it kind of pushes it beyond, kind of what I'm looking for sometimes. But Thanksgiving just nails it. Which is going to bring me to number one. Through process of elimination, you've probably figured out what it is already if you're familiar with Eli Roth's filmography at all. But if you're not, I'm going to save you all the problem solving, because I am going to tell you right now. My favourite Eli Roth film of all time has always been and remains to be Hostel Part 2. I think Hostel Part 2 is incredibly underrated. And the biggest critique I see of it is from people saying that he subverted expectations with Hostel 1 by making the men victims, and then he went back to the traditional trope of making women victims in Part 2. That is not how I see Hostel Part 2 at all. I don't think it's him returning to tropes. I think it's him creating strong female characters who rise up and do damage to the elite hunting club in a way that the men couldn't. I think it re-solidifies the idea that men weren't strong enough to fight the power in the first film, but women are definitely strong enough to in this second one. We've got Lauren German in the lead role. I think it's Lauren German, who's amazing. She carries this flick so well. She's not your traditional final girl. She's got a bit of spunk to her, which I really like. She's got a bit of attitude. We've got Bayou Phillips as her best friend, who is very much a horror movie cipher. Like, she's basically there to be the girl who breaks all the rules. She does drugs, she drinks, she has promiscuous sex, so of course she is punished, as horror films often dictate. I really like Bayou Phillips. She's been in a lot of really alternative films that I enjoy quite a bit. Most recognizably probably Bully. But she's been in a lot of really kind of unusual films, and it was nice to see her on screen again. Laura Mazzarello, I can't remember how to pronounce her last name, but she was the best friend in Princess Diaries, and then she's in this flick, which is a weird turn of events, but she's fantastic in it. The kills in this film are not as extreme, and that's why I like this film so much. The first film goes into place that gets a little bit gross. Particularly, there's a character who gets her eyeball removed, and that's very, very off-putting, of course. It's very confronting in that first film. It doesn't quite get that extreme in this film, but it doesn't take away the fear level. It doesn't take away the xenophobia that these characters experience. It connects with the first film so well. It builds on the kind of the established lore. But I just think, all in all, it's just a better executed film. I think it improves what they did in the first one, and Yeah, I think the most memorable sequence in this film for me is probably the Lady Bathory scene. So there's one member of the elite hunting club, who she lies in a tub and then she bathes in blood. Basically, it's very visceral, very visually arresting, and I thought that's a really fantastic scene. The other thing I like about this film, and I know sometimes less is more, we don't always need a backstory, but there's a second storyline, a subplot in this film of two American guys who have finally got the chance to join the elite hunting club. They get to take on their wish of becoming killers themselves. And there's one guy who's really quiet and unsure the entire time. And then there's another guy who's really excited about doing it. And of course, spoiler alert for a 20-year-old film, when it comes to crunch time, when it comes to them having to take up the blade and become killers, the really excitable guy backs out, he can't handle it, and the quiet guy reveals his true nature and becomes the antagonist of the film. It's really well done. It's not for the squeamish, but I would almost say if you had to choose between Hostel and Hostel 2, Hostel 2 is tamer. And it's not even that it's tame, it's more restrained. It allows you to get some violence, get some gore, but it's never too much. It's never going to make you feel sick. The first one, there's definitely some gross moments. This second one, I think, is handled a lot better. If you're a fan of the Harry Potter franchise, Victor Crumb shows up, so there's that as well. But all in all, I think it's a really great film. It's a really enjoyable sequel. It's a really enjoyable horror film. I just think it's fantastic. So that's it. That is my episode on Eli Roth. I'm glad to have finally given him some props because no one in my circle of friends watches Eli Roth films. And that's not me complaining. It's just he's a very divisive director and he doesn't make easy to watch films. I remember, I think the only time I watched an Eli Roth film with a friend was with my buddy Josh, who's been on the podcast a bunch of times. He came over to my place once. It was after we finished high school. It was our first year of uni. And I was like, or maybe we were still in high school because I worked at the video store, so maybe we were still in high school. And I had the DVD of Hostel and I'd watched it. I'm like, we should check this out, man. I think you'll dig it. Because he didn't like horror. He felt horror was very simple, very silly, very predictable. And I was like, you're not going to predict what's going to go on in this flick. And I remember seeing him react and being repulsed by the film. So I do remember that. I love the work of Eli Roth. I think he's a fantastic horror film. I think he walks the line between entertaining and extreme quite well. He's never so far gone that he enters the realm of extreme cinema, but I think he is one of the last kind of guards before extreme cinema. Most filmmakers don't get as full on as him, but I think he's a really entertaining filmmaker, very entertaining storyteller. I also like him as an actor. Like him in Inglourious Basterds is fantastic. But anyway, that's my ranking of Eli Roth films. I'll do it again one more time for you, just so you remember. In 9th place, Death Wish. 8th place, The House with Clock on Its Walls. 7th place, Knock Knock. 6th, Borderlands. 5th, Hostel. 4th, Cabin Fever. 3rd place, The Green Inferno. Thanksgiving is at number 2. And in 1st place for me, it's Hostel Part 2. But as I said before, from 5 through to 1, they're fairly interchangeable. Those are the best of the best, I think. They're his strongest films. But all in all, he's had a very interesting and exciting career, and I can't wait to see what he does next. So that's going to do it. We're going to have another director focus coming up soon. I'll do another director's episode. I've still got not Eli Roth, we just did Eli Roth. Edgar Wright, Kevin Smith, James Gunn, and there are a few others I probably want to explore as well. And I might even start doing some individual film focuses as well. I'm trying to load up as many of these episodes before I go on my hiatus so you guys have something to listen to while I'm raising a family. Thank you for listening. Go ahead and support us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all the socials. You can catch me on the Lights, Camera, Rant podcast. By the time this drops, that episode definitely will be out. Listen to the back catalogue. If you reach out, I probably won't respond because I'm still on hiatus, but I'll do my best. But as we say on this podcast every week, guys, I was a teenage film snob, but I'm trying to be better. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.